How is everyone doing right now as we are now moving on to the last sessions for today? As I mentioned earlier that in the last session, we are going to bring up all the Q&A that everyone has sent through our chat box, that we are going to have a live Q&A session. But apart from that, most important that in this session, we also have a special guest that would join us as well. So this round, we also have the honor to welcome our moderator in these sessions as well. So I would like to take a short minute here and introduce our moderator for the last session on the live Q&A and meeting up with our special guests. So ladies and gentlemen, here in this session, our moderator is Dr. Montira Unakul from Unesco Bangkok. She works as a programmist within the Asia-Pacific region and related to the safeguarding and sustainable development of cultural heritage. And with the focus of World Heritage here, she has authored and edited publications related to heritage management, urbanism, and sustainable tourism. So today, we are very welcome to have the honor for Dr. Montira to do the moderator in the last sessions for the Q&A session and also leading everyone to meet with our special guests for today. สวัสดีค่ะ Dr. Montira.
Sawadika, thank you very much for the kind introduction. So I'd like to now move us into the final session of this last two very interesting days that we have been exchanging on the theme of refocus heritage in the new normal. And so the talks so far have been focused on the issue of heritage, the role of heritage in our contemporary society. And so now for our last panel discussion, I would like us to link us to the second part of the theme, which is new normal. And so this is a reality that has been facing us now for almost 2 years. And so it's an opportunity to reflect with some of the leading practitioners that we have from around the Asia-Pacific region, and also our special guest, Dr. Mario Santana, Secretary General of Economies. So at this point in time, I'd like to turn the floor over to Dr. Mario Santana, who will be sharing with us some thoughts about the pandemic and its impact on cultural heritage, as well as a design profession. He himself is trained as an architect as well, and one of the leading specialists looking at issues of documentation and so forth related to heritage work. After that, we'll open the floor to our different speakers from yesterday and today, looking at some of the reflections on their own work, but from a larger perspective in the national context or the Asia-Pacific context or the global context about where we need to go from here, given the lessons learned from the last 2 years. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the floor to Dr. Santana for him to get us started. Over to you, Mario.
Thank you, Montira, and thank you for this very kind invitation to share some ideas of my work in ICOMOS and also on my professional life, and also a person that has been really impacted by the pandemic in different aspects. And I think that there is a lot of ground to cover, and I'm very happy to be part of this panel this morning. I'm connecting from Ottawa in Canada. It's a little earlier here than it is in Bangkok, but I'm very, very happy to share. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to throw out some ideas there. And I hope that these ideas will serve the panel for the further discussions and exchanges that we're going to have. So I wear two hats, let's say, in this presentation. So one is as an educator. I am a professor at Carleton University in Canada, teaching engineers and architects about conservation of historic places. And I am the Secretary General of the International Council of Monuments and Sites, which is one of the largest non-for-profit organization, professional organization, dealing with issues of the conservation and also an official advisory body to the UNESCO World Heritage Convention. So when we talk about, heritage under threat, what we imagined before the pandemic is certainly, destruction by conflict or looting, or climate change impacting sites and then destroying this very important historic fabric, or earthquakes and abandonment of these sites. But who would have imagined 2 years ago that we would have a pandemic and that this pandemic would have different impacts to our heritage? I mean, there has been an unprecedented impact, specifically because of the lockdowns that prevent people to enjoy the sites. So tourism, Montira was talking before we joined the session about this, but also the fact of monitoring the sites and conserving the sites, being able to be there when something is happening. So basically, throughout the pandemic, we saw about 90% of World Heritage sites partially or completely closed, according to UNESCO. And this had different effects on the entire world. Not only the lockdown, but also the affectation of the livelihood of local communities because of lack of income, because of the visitors and other aspects. So we see in the pandemic that we have, even now with the rollout of vaccines, we see a strong inequality in how things are going. So here in Canada, we're quite well. We have more or less 70% of the population have got their first dose. And it seems like we're getting out of this lockdown gradually. But what about other countries? So I think that this is a local problem and with a global dimension. And I am speaking from my experience as a person working in the international sphere as a Secretary General, that we see a lot of inequalities on how things are happening. Now, COVID has given us a lot of opportunities to reflect. And I think that basically governments have mobilized millions of dollars to develop the vaccines, collaborations using, virtual means. I think that this year I have had more ICOMOS meetings than I ever had throughout my 25 years as a member of the organization. And it's been a lot of hard work. I have to say that being in the board of ICOMOS, we have met at least 10 times this year, while we only met twice a year. But also, we have seen that many heritage organizations have moved to the digital world. So they have digitized their assets, so they can provide this kind of remote access to sites, virtual visits, guided tours using the internet, and then breaking time zones so we can connect with anyone, anytime. I mean, who would imagine I will be connecting from Canada, talking to Bangkok at this time of the day? Now we seek a kind of gradual reopening. So how can digital technologies actually improve this risk reduction while access is limited? How can we guarantee? Maybe we have to think about new approaches in which the digital approach complements the physical approach. And then we might not need to, just go there to the site and enjoy everything. Maybe we have to, I think that Montira was saying this before the event started, we have to rethink how the strategies can work. And also when we talk about heritage organizations, I was thinking that many people are working from home, but in many organizations it was difficult because most of the digital assets, the assets in which they base their work are not digitized. So, for instance, documents, etc. So I think that the pandemic has shown us a lot of issues. But what about this sustainability? So, I mean, sustainability using virtual visits, it could be challenged. I mean, of course, connecting through the computer to see a site is probably, I don't need to travel there. I don't need to spend CO2 to go to this place and visit. But I'm also using some computer power. I have actually a colleague who's doing a study about people working from home compared to people working in their offices. And they have realized that the consumption of energy is very similar because the buildings are still being heated, are still air conditioned. As we are not there, but they're still being maintained. So I think that this calls for a big shift in architecture. How are we going to design places where when we're working from home, maybe those places are shut down and then we don't need to consume energy there. And then also meetings, for instance, I don't think that ICOMOS can go to the past. We cannot have only physical meetings. We need to have virtual meetings. We need to be more inclusive because the organization was a little bit exclusive because people that travel were able to travel, were able to pay, were the ones who were able to meet. So now that we have the virtual means, maybe we can call all these important meetings of the organization using virtual tools. Now, technology has advanced a lot. We were talking about documentation, with your phone, you have access to taking notes, you are connected to the web, you have a camera. There are many interactions that you can conduct with a smartphone. So I think that this is also another revolution that we're going to see in the future. So I think that with this, I'm going to conclude. Montira asked me to mention these two things. So impacts of the pandemic as a wake-up call for our heritage and design work, and the importance of heritage and design in finding fresh opportunities to recover from the pandemic in a more sustainable manner through digital transformation, more collaborative approaches, greener and more socially conscious design. And I think that these aspects are very important, but we also have to understand that even though we have a more digital transformation, this digital transformation also requires energy. So I think that it goes both ways. We have to think how the digital can complement the physical, but how the physical needs to change so there will be not that much energy consumption. So with this, Montira, going back to you. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much to Mario for sharing with us some of the thoughts and reflections that have been coming out of the global processes, particularly driven by Icomos, sort of the premier heritage platform working on professional heritage management. And so now we come back to our speakers. We're very happy to have with us, this full range of expertise coming from the Pacific, from Australia, from South Asia, from Bangladesh, from here in Southeast Asia. We have speakers joining us from Malaysia, and of course here from our home country, Thailand, but also from East Asia, represented by Mr. Yu, coming from Korea as well. And so within this broad spectrum across the Asia-Pacific region, which has been very hard hit, and particularly in the last few months, have seen really catastrophic numbers, as well as knock-on effects with economy, social factors, and environmental factors as well. We would like to invite some of our speakers from the last 2 days to reflect on, what has been your greatest wake-up call over the past 2 years from the pandemic, as it's affected your heritage work or your design work, or whether you've seen that it's affected the situation in your country or the region as a whole. And so we'd first like to throw the question to Paoba Architects, followed by Mr. Yu, and then ending up with Mr. Croker from Australia. So please, Paoba.
For sure, during the pandemic, these crises slowed down everything, and for the heritage also, some heritage they have been abandoned, but because of the visitor decrease, for sure, and occurring the functional obsolescence. So in this heritage that have been abandoned or underused, we think the strategy that can help in this situation can be adaptive reuse strategy. For sure, we have to maintain them in some way during this time, but for some heritage that have a possibility to adapt, we can use this strategy because it helps mitigate this obsolescence. For example, when we reuse the structure, we can expand the life cycle of the materials and construction. This would be a way to sustain these heritage. And not only the landmark of the building, we should concern and consider about the hood, the open space surrounding them, the surrounding greenery space. For sure, we know when we live in those kinds of spaces, it's quite generous to live there, to stroll around. For example, it's quite comfortable to live in. And I think not only the heritage area, but in our daily life, in our building, we can reuse many kinds of things that to make our space livable and comfortable. For example, I would say nowadays we see the examples of the existing building convert into something that useful for our life. We can see the healthcare facility that insert into the existing heritage. We see the hotel that convert into the temporary use of the hospital, or in Thailand we call hospital. And even the school dormitory and even convention hall, like normally we held the ASA forum in the convention hall in Impact Muang Thong Thani every year. And then this year that area turned to be like a field hospital to serve and to deal with this crisis in the bigger scale.
Yeah, I do agree with Tris, and I think that the main challenge that we cannot predict the future anymore. The situation is so unstable for this week and next week. We cannot sure that what's going to happen next week. I think in terms of design that we are facing right now, we need to think about the flexibility and thinking about the design program that is very hybridized and very adaptable. We think about the big space and it can change itself or change adaptive reuse itself to be another program. So I think that resiliency and adaptability, I think is the main thing that we need to like think carefully at this time.
Thank you very much for those reflections. I think I was struck watching the presentations this afternoon. Yesterday, we saw a lot of beautiful buildings, beautiful interiors, as well as the city context. And today we saw a lot of greenery, both from Saif's presentation as well as the Pawa and Shema presentations about how the context beyond our built context or our social context, but also the importance of the ecological context as kind of a main decider in the sustainability of our buildings and our society. So with those initial thoughts about resilience, now we turn over to Mr. Yu from Korea. What has been your big wake-up call in your practice or the larger context in the last year?
The biggest hit of a pandemic caused by the coronavirus is ban and restriction on travel and meeting. This painful situation has been going on for 2 years, but it will be set free someday with the vaccination and the development of treatment. It's really pain for mankind, but it is also a good time for precious rest and regeneration for the earth and natural heritage, which have been suffered severe due to the human beings. Before the pandemic, in the meantime, if we have focused on visiting the site or museum and taking a look around, but after the pandemic, we can receive more in-depth information through video or material prepared by experts or curators through internet, the media during the pandemic. In addition, there is an advantage that many people can watch at the same time without directly visiting the site in a distance place. I think these changes are good things that we could get through the coronavirus, the pandemic. On the other hand, using the new computer technology, just as mentioned by Mario, such as virtual reality and augmented reality, to reproduce the monument and heritage, using them to understand the public is a good way. Yesterday presentation, I showed the one case of the Gongpyeong Historic Site Museum. It was opened 2 years ago. During the promoting the urban redevelopment project in downtown Seoul, a large number of relics from 400 to 300 years ago were excavated. All the relics were preserved at original location, and we made the museum on that. And the new building with the size of the 30 floor was built on the museum. It takes a lot of time and effort and financial resources to verify and restore the alleyways in the 16th century. But we just preserve at the original form when it was excavated, and by using the computer technology such as virtual reality and augmented reality to reproduce the building and the street of the 16th centuries. Time and resources have been saved, and many people have made easy access through the internet. And on the one hand, it is possible to restore while conducting the research. On the other hand, to shape and update using this new computer technology is one of the good ways.
Thank you very much to Mr. Yu. I think we've all experienced personally how the last 2 years has really accelerated digital transformation. A lot of the technology was there, but we didn't embrace it before. But now it's become not only useful, but in fact critical as a way of coping and allowing us to learn about places, interact with places, but also to design and to preserve places in a, wouldn't say more effective way, but certainly gives us another option. And so now we turn over to Mr. Croker for your reflections on.
Okay. One of the things that became obvious to me and our practice was that in working with old buildings, we find that we have buildings which have been built with traditional technologies using natural ventilation, cross-ventilation, access to sunlight. And we are increasingly in our practice and in our modern buildings relying on artificial air supplies, artificial light, all of these things. And with the nature of the transmission of the COVID virus through an aerosol, that has really highlighted the weakness in that whole system. And I have long argued that where we have existing buildings that have existing windows that are operable, we should maintain those as operable windows and not seal them up so that they cannot be used for natural ventilation should the occupant choose to do that. Frequently, we are instructed by mechanical consultants to seal the building so that an air conditioning system can be made more efficient. And I have often argued that that is not the right approach. And for me, this whole COVID situation has confirmed that I think that's the right path. Traditional buildings were built without reliance on artificial sources of energy, and they had to rely on the qualities of materials, the nature of their design, their orientation, all of those things. And they had a relationship to the outside which made them healthy buildings. They had a relationship to the trees. And that presentation by Pave architects really showed how beautiful that can be accommodated and incorporated into a complex to great benefit for everybody, including the buildings. And I think we really need to go back and look at that. And if we are in situations like the Opera House Auditoria, where we have to rely on artificial light, we have to rely on air conditioning, then I think we need to explore technologies that allow us to clean the air of viruses in a sustainable manner, not with more rapid air changes, but to find some technology that makes this work, because I think this will not be the last pandemic that we get, and it's something we need to look at for the future.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think that has been a struggle in many places in dealing with the nature of transmission, and then how to cope with being in indoor spaces with relatively low air transfer rates and so forth. And so, in fact, some of the traditional or historic designs actually are providing us with clues and guidelines of how to allow that to happen. And so being able to bring that knowledge back into retrofitting now contemporary buildings and how they operate, I think is a real lesson that we can learn from our heritage know-how. And so based on some of these reflections, and we've heard a number of keywords from our first three colleagues, whether it's resilience, adaptability of program and adaptability of spaces, the role of digital technology for learning, for practice, for design, for conservation, but also sort of traditional know-how and how that actually maybe promotes a better environment for a more healthy existence, have been some of the keywords. So now I'd like to turn over to our second round of colleagues to reflect upon, based on some of these thoughts and some of these realizations over the last 2 years. We've talked a lot about the importance of heritage plus design and how that becomes the pathway towards sustainability. And as you know, the definition of sustainability is based on 3 pillars. So it's planet or environmental concerns, it's people and their well-being, and then it's also ultimately prosperity. And so now we'd like to invite our remaining colleagues to share with us some reflections about how we need to re-gear our work and our practice, but also our mindset in order to achieve this true version of sustainability in the long term. And so we'll start off with Saif Al-Haq, who spoke very compellingly about understanding the larger basis for ecological sustainability, not just within the footprint of a building or a project, but you showed us maps of the entire Bangladesh or the entire Sundarbans region, and understanding that whole ecosystem as a driver for growth. There's also a question that comes to you from the audience about the importance of an evidence-based approach. You talked about the role of documentation that has been carried out, in this case, for heritage buildings in Bangladesh, but your other work showed us also the importance of scientific evidence and gathering all of that as the basis for sound decision-making and sound design. Can you talk a little bit about what we really mean in terms of sustainability vis-a-vis planet?
Thank you, Montira. I'm very happy that when you were grouping the sessions, I was in this session with Pava Architects, because you had sent the recordings. I had seen bits and pieces of the recording. I mean, and then yesterday I saw Alan's work. I missed Lowe's work, and I also saw a bit of Yu's work. I mean, the feel of being in a conference, like the old times, the pre-pandemic days. I mean, I wanted to experience that in a virtual platform. We have been participating in a few of these, but that I mean, you go for the coffee break, or you go out and light up a smoke or something. I mean, you can do it in virtual things, but I don't think that the virtual will replace the physical, at least to me, not yet. And I'm being not fully versed in the virtual world. I still enjoy the physical world, and I really would love to get out and travel. Talking about the pandemic, how it has disrupted, how it has affected our lives, I think that it is same for all of us, and then it is different for all of us, because of our context, where we are, what kind of capabilities we have about facing this pandemic. I mean, we cannot have a very generalized view of how a pandemic has affected the people all over the world. I mean, how the health facilities are, what are our research capabilities, all these things come into picture. So what really has made this pandemic more aware of, the issues? One is very important, which I often talk about, is the connection between things. The connection between people, humans, and rest of the system. We are just a part of the big system. We, through our knowledge, we've been able to achieve fantastic things. We have conquered the world. We've been to the topmost peak, the deepest of the waters and everything, but yet this tiny little virus, which we cannot see has created such a disruption that we found ourselves totally helpless. So this is the essence of this planet, that we do know a lot, but yet we don't know much. But we at least know that there is a connection. When such a pandemic breaks out, it doesn't remain within national boundaries. It might have originated in some place, yes, and look how fast it traveled. And even today, a year gone by, we're seeing the various type of mutations happening and new variants coming. We're not feeling at all comfortable with the vaccine coming into scene. We thought that, okay, once the vaccine comes, you get this magic shot and you are back to your normal life. So that is one part, of this wake-up call. But the other wake-up call, which has been ringing for quite a while, about the fragile nature of this connection, because of all this sort of things that we have been doing to the planet. The reason the planet started warming up, it didn't start warming up on its own, but it was because of the human-induced action. What humans have been doing, that just simply, the scientists have established that. And that took us a while to accept. We have been. So I think that the reason I was talking about this, looking at it in a very broader way of things, is that unless we have a better understanding of the planetary system, whatever we do, if we are, our interventions need to take into consideration. And you're absolutely right. I appreciate your observation that on one hand, we have been documenting things, which our ancestors have built. We wanted to have a good record. We wanted to draw inspirations from them. But at the same time, what exists now? What is the condition of the surface of the planet? All the data, all the information, and that will equip us to sort of deal with our future needs in a much more intelligent, responsible way. So that is, I think, something that I'd like to share again in this conversation. So there is this word that I have been using lately. Last year, I was asked to write a article for a magazine, and the editor asked me, what next? How do you see the future, of Arcadia because of this? So in response to what next, my answer, that was a thing about architecture. I said that architecture of equity. We need to see things in a much more broader perspective, rather than only seeing within national boundaries or some group boundaries. We need to expand this view of ourselves on the planet. Yes, we have drawn up these national boundaries, we are countries, we are sovereigns, but we have to go beyond that. We have to go beyond that, and we have to go beyond this idea of also competitions. We have this ranking, which is the most developed country, which is the least developed country. Why do we need to carry on with this kind of ranking? Why can't we all be that we have the same level of development? When we talk about digital connectivity, here in Bangladesh, I don't think that we can right away switch to a digital mode of operation. We still have that kind of limitations. So we need to bring all our resources to our table, and then we see that how best we can share them and how we can maintain this connection between each other. It's fantastic. We are meeting up people from different places. This conference has brought us together. So we can continue to do this. This is something I would like to emphasize, that how we consume the resources that this planet has given us. It has given us plenty, enough. And we can definitely find out ways how we can equitably share this resource. And we can work together for a better future, and we can really build up a world of equity. That's what I believe and I hope. And I think Power Architects have again shown us that how one can continue living in the future without really getting rid of the past. You can bring it to your future living also. Excellent. Thank you. That's what I needed to say.
Thank you very much, Saif. I think it's really we're facing a planetary call for survival. So on the issue of equity, which you brought up and also Mario brought up in his earlier talk as well, that we now pass the baton to Kunam Chai, talk about sort of equity issues as being really important for and design work.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah, I totally agree with Saif that we need to share our resources, not only among humans, but other life forms as well, because we are all living in the same ecosystem. The pandemics occurred to me how important it is to be able to access to the public space, especially in the congested place like Bangkok. This pandemic betrays or reveals all the inequalities in our society, and I think being able to access to the public space is one of them. And we all know that the pandemic hit harder on the poorer communities and populations who usually live in a very high density surroundings. But again, at the same time, they were hit harder, but in the end, the impact will go back to other people in the same society as well. So there's no other way that we can continue living without integration and sharings. For example, I go back to the public space. When the first and second wave hit and the parks were closed, we were forced to go out and being outdoor and exercise on the street. And we know how badly we need those spaces to be in good condition and good quality, and we wish that it were more green. Bangkok is one of the cities that has very limited open space per populations. If by number is less than 6 square meters of the land per one person. But when we look from above, the green and the open spaces are not that limited, but it's just not accessible by most people. The land divided. I mean, the government land were divided and given to different authorities and organizations, and they're fenced up. Even those land are not used or utilized. And for the public sector, they're also like fenced up, closed up, and they call it exclusive or privilege. And they hired landscape architect to design amazing, beautiful landscape just for selected few who can buy their properties. So we also realized that Bangkok is in like very close proximity to the sea. As Dr. Crocker said earlier, that when the lockdown taking place, you can hear the sound of the birds singing around you. Here in Bangkok, I can feel the breeze, the sea breeze, and which makes me realize that, oh, Bangkok is so close to the sea that we didn't realize before because of the sound of the cars and the fumes and the air pollutions and so on. So how about we need to like stay back and look at how we can integrate it, all those land, all those public space and open space and resource to be shared by all the people and animals and other life forms. How can we introduce the tax benefits to the private sector so that they can open up their unused land for people to access for recreation or food production, even for the period of time, maybe like a couple of years before they develop those land. How can we integrate the working method and the communications among the government authorities so that they can open part of their land for public use? How can we like convert the drainage canal not only for drainage but for other like nature and for people to go in and use it as the recreational space? I think, but first of all, we need to like change our mindset and like being realized, being aware, and got that strongest wake-up call that we cannot continue living on like this. We need to, for example, unmow some of the lawn in the public park so that some insects can flourish and some birds can have their more food in there. And how about those beautiful landscaped condominiums? At least they can open their fence, or at least they can like, instead of making it solid, but make it more transparent so that poorer people who use the street can look through and enjoy their beautiful garden. Not only for like access to be there, but maybe just visual to see some greens. I think that will also like help their mind. So I think we need to look at like all around things, other life form, other people, and realize that we cannot be separated. We are in this same situation, and the situation is even more and more challenging.
Thank you very much, though, to Kun Namchai for talking to us about really the right to the city and the right to space, not only for humans, but also for all our fellow life forms as well. And I think that's really a holistic view about how we need to move forward. And then finally, on the issue of prosperity, how do we need to consider changing our design and heritage practice in order to be able to achieve prosperity beyond just dollars, but maybe in a more well-rounded way? Lauren, hello.
Thank you, Montira. I didn't expect to have to speak about prosperity, but I guess I'll meet the challenge, I hope. Okay. Well, prosperity has to be linked to the other four P's, right? We cannot do without peace, planet, people, and partnerships, right? So let me look at the relationships. I think the first immediate relationship is the personal versus the planet, and the personal versus people, right? Because explanation. So the second one is people relate to partnerships in this aspect, and I'm very keen to talk about that, right? So on the personal level, right, the work from home paradigm has helped the world to fast forward global transformation, right? In the evolution of communities in all its forms. I work in groups and have access to resource people at a touch of a button, as we are now. We organize workshops as opposed to one-to-ones, right, as a mode of operations, which actually results in collective problem solving and breaking down of silos. Right? We have learned how to be inclusive and consultative as a given, and even my most reserved colleagues have learned how to express themselves and take ownership of ideas. All these are human qualities and skills which result in molding mindsets to be in line with sustainable approaches. Okay, so that's on the personal level. Oops. Lost my space, right? People and the planet, right? We talk a lot about climate change, right? And actually in this area of sustainable development, which is what our focus is, right? Pivot and to survive and to find new economies to invest in, and at the same time, be responsible. There's actually, somebody mentioned recently, US 3 trillion available for sustainability. Right? So if you think of that, if we learn how to pivot and connect with work that we right? And it's up to us as designers to decide where we want to engage. There's a lot of work for us to do without having to sacrifice our principles. And I think that is the important thing, right? The other relationship I always think about is natural sustainability and biodiversity in relation to cultural sustainability. We think along those same lines. And now more than ever, we have to learn how to connect those two baselines adequately and efficiently and convert it into sustainable initiatives, right? And there will be a payback. We can operate on various economic models, but new normal organizations now look at the triple bottom line, to put it simply, right? So you try and link this triple bottom line to the other thing that is now very, very pertinent, which is circular economies, right? It's not a new word. I think we are just learning how to understand its application within the whole of society, within the whole of various infrastructures and systems, right? Whether it's manufacturing, whether it's building now, whether it's about recycling, it's all about that, right? So we have to learn the tool and learn these new tools. As designers and as heritage conservationists, we have to get beyond the skills that we have picked up and learn how to talk about social economies, okay? So that's the other critical part. Pivot and move into this area, and we continue to intensify collaborations, partnerships, and communications, right? We will be able to get beyond this pandemic. And that's my realization, you know. Cultural heritage is actually, right, sustainable. Never been over concerned about short periods of time. I always take the long view, and I know that within that timeline and the landscape, we will always be able to deliver projects that will answer the brief. And as we do that, it automatically answers the issue of prosperity, which follows the equation. I think I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you very much to Lawrence. And so your last few words struck me and reminded me of something you had shared with us earlier, maybe some years ago now, that when you work on a project, including a conservation project, you're not looking at what the project will look like at the day that you submit it to the client, but you're looking at what the project is going to be like in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years time. And I think it's important as practitioners and as professionals, whether we're designing a new building or we're restoring an old building, to take the long view, and to take the long view not only for the sake of that particular building or that particular site, but also how that building and that site fits with society, how it fits with nature, how it contributes to the planet. And only in that way, I think, can we be truly sustainable. And so on that note, I'd like to share a few slides as well. And then after that, I'll turn back to give the last word to Dr. Mario Santana. I'm telling you now, so you have a few minutes to prepare. Okay, so a second. And so I think we've had a fruitful discussion over the last 2 days, and I think we've talked about how heritage and design practice needs to move towards sustainability and innovation, and that we can't continue just in our usual status quo as before. And Saif shared with us his last slide, which was his project, the Arcadia Education Project, which won the 2019 Aga Khan Award for Architecture. And I wanted to share with you even more pictures of this. And I also wanted to remind you of the quotation that Ellen shared with us from the Australia Icomos Borough Charter, which is to change as much as necessary, but as little as possible. And I think in a way this ethic extends beyond conservation work, but it also extends to new design work, and our responsibility for us as designers to understand that whatever interventions we make have an impact. They have an impact on the neighborhood, they have an impact on the city, they have an impact on ecology, they have an impact on the planet. And so whatever we do, in a way, needs to be as subtle and as responsible as possible. And this is very much reflected also in the philosophy of the 2021 Pritzker Prize winners that Saif also mentioned. And they have said, use what is there, stay simple, embrace the outdoors, honor light, freedom, and grace. Spend the minimum to get the maximum. And here we have pictures from Saif's project that show us about the beauty of simplicity in materials, but also in being able to maintain ways of life of local people, but also to be able to maintain kind of the way that the surrounding context functions and sort of the ecological systems that are underpinning, where we live and where we create our new designs. And so bearing in mind these different scales and these different issues of materiality and ecology and context, I think that helps us move forward into a more sustainable path for the future. And as heritage practitioners, we are facing a really pivotal moment where we are no longer simply working on conserving monuments and conserving archaeological sites. We are now being more open to the issues of living heritage. But more and more, I think the pressures that face us require us to take a sustainability mindset to our work, so that heritage becomes part of sustainable development work. And sustainable development work is only sustainable if we think about what is our heritage, both our natural heritage as well as our cultural heritage. And on this basis, would we be able to then deal with managing crises, to be able to achieve resilience, sustainability, to deliver justice and well-being to society as a whole? And so on the 5 Ps, which Lawrence mentioned, which is people, planet, prosperity, but also peace and partnerships, you'll notice that the biggest ring of all, of course, is the biosphere, which is planet. UNESCO has been working along with other organizations in order to think about how do we overcome these challenges. In the short term, of course, we're facing the COVID pandemic. And so UNESCO has done a series of studies looking at heritage, culture, nature, and the pandemic. And there have been a series of recommendations about how to help people overcome the pandemic by building back better, by using digital technologies, by being more prepared for emergencies as well as for response. When we come to the issue of planet, then we begin to take a longer view. It's not just, the next year or 2 years that we need to get through, but it's the next 30, 40, 50 years, the next century, the next 2 centuries that we need to be able to anticipate when we have issues like climate change and how that's going to affect our work as design practitioners, but also as heritage practitioners. We really need to take the long view. And then finally, when we come back to the issue of prosperity, we're faced with the challenges of how do we merge sustainable development with heritage work and with design work. And, this requires, for instance, thinking about how the work that we do can create jobs, livelihoods, meaningful ways that people can create economic prosperity. But it also links back to what Lawrence talked about, which is the circular economy. Heritage design, is the perfect opportunity really for circular economy beyond just recycling a plastic bottle. We're talking now about how do we create meaning and viable uses for entire buildings, for entire neighborhoods, for entire landscapes, for entire cities and metropolitan areas in a way which understands that all the embodied investments and energy that has been put into creating those spaces, and how do we ensure that they're meaningful for the next centuries to come. And so UNESCO has been working on making this connection between heritage, design, and sustainable development. Many of the speakers we have joining us today are actually winners from the UNESCO Asia Pacific Awards for Cultural Heritage Conservation. And in this awards program last year, we introduced a new category, which is special recognition for sustainable development. And this can be awarded either to a project which is a conservation project or a new design project. But in either case, that project has to have a significant impact in contributing to sustainable development. And we think this is the way of the future. It's not enough just to acknowledge good design. It's not just enough to acknowledge good conservation work, but we have to be able to put ourselves to a higher bar, which is to ask the question, and how does our work contribute to sustainable development? And so you can learn more about the Heritage Awards program by scanning that link. And anyone who has projects that are in fact eligible, our deadline has just been extended to the 31st of August this year, and we welcome you to apply. And then finally, I'd like to close with another issue that Lawrence mentioned, which is, given that this is the new reality that is facing us, are we actually equipped as heritage practitioners or as design practitioners to meet these new challenges? And to this effect, UNESCO has developed a new framework for competences, which we call the UNESCO Competence Framework for Cultural Heritage Management, which lays out the kind of universe of skills and knowledge that you need to be able to become a well-rounded practitioner working in this area and working towards a sustainability mindset. And then now I'd like to close with the reflections from our panelists over the last 50 minutes. And some key words that you have shared with us in terms of how we need to move forward in order to achieve sustainability through heritage and through design work. So our colleagues from PAWAT talked about the importance of adaptability of programs and spaces, the need to be able to design for resilience. Mr. Yu shared with us the importance about digital technology and transformation for our learning, our design, and our practice. Alan Crooker from Australia reminded us about actually the wisdom that is contained in traditional building know-how and traditional building systems particularly natural ventilation, natural lighting. Saif emphasized the importance about interconnections across space, but also across different systems that allow us to understand and respond to our planet's vulnerabilities. Kun Nam Chai eloquently spoke about equity issues and the importance of being able to share resources among humans and other life forms, particularly in public spaces. And then finally, Lawrence encouraged us as practitioners and as professionals to pivot towards long-term sustainability as the bedrock of the work that we do. And so based on this, I would like to turn over the floor to Mario Santana for some final reflections about this long-term perspective about sustainability in our work and to close the session. Mario.
Thank you, Montira, and I feel very honored to be able to close this session after, all the interventions from my colleagues, and I would like to thank you for all your contributions. I think that we have a big responsibility as, architects, educators, people working in intergovernmental organizations such as Montira, but I want to stress the fact that the circular economy is something that we are talking a lot. How can we recycle construction materials? How can we calculate the embodied carbon of existing and historic buildings to reduce the CO2 emissions? And this is all very positive, and also how to use traditional knowledge to, of constructions that are adapted to the climate and how they can teach our modern systems. This is all very important, but I think that we also need to have change in government, because unless it's cheaper to do circular economy rather than to take everything into the waste, into the bin, into the underground, then this is not going to change. To give you an example, I was watching a lecture in New York, in which, New York is a big city where there is a lot of construction waste. And it's actually cheaper just to drive this waste south to another state in the United States, to the landfill, that actually recycle it. And we also see that in Amazon, when you return an item, Amazon destroys this item rather than to resell it. So I think that we have to implement other mechanisms. So I think the partnership with government and communities is really important, because I also watched another presentation about the responsibility of companies in recycling. So if you are not going to recycle, you would have to pay a tax. So that makes recycling cheaper. So we probably need to enforce this kind of tools to be able to generate change. Now, I think that COVID has taught us that we can be very connected using the web and using the internet. I think that Saif clearly mentioned the disparities in the connection of internet, because of course I'm connecting with you from Canada, where we have good internet, but many other parts of the world do not have good internet and they don't have access. So how can we digitize those places, and how can they have access? And then we also have informal economy in many of our countries. So I am originally Venezuelan, and in Venezuela we have informal economy. We cannot work from home. So how can we make those changes? But anyway, I don't want to finish in a negative way. I want to finish in a positive note, because I think that the contributions of our colleagues have been very meaningful. I invite you all to, if you allow me, Montira, I invite you all to join ICOMOS as a Secretary General. I have to say that we have very powerful mechanisms, in particular our working groups. So Montira showed the climate change future of the past report. So we have a very important climate change working group that is working towards many good aspects. And then we have our SDG working group, and that is also working on sustainable development goals, and put heritage on the table for change and sustainability. So with that, I would like to conclude the panel, and thank you so much for your attention, and hope to see you again, either virtually or physically. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much to Mario, and thank you very much to all of our colleagues for joining us today. I invite our panelists to stay on for the all-important group photo session for a few minutes.
Yes.
And then we also thank the team coming to us from all corners of the globe for joining us today, and also joining us yesterday, and for your interest and your enthusiasm in all of the proceedings so far. Thank you. And then finally, a big thanks to the ASA team for all of the hard work behind the scenes and pulling off the event.
Thank you very much once again. And now, as Dr. Montira has mentioned, we are going to have a group photo together with all of our distinguished speakers up on the screen. It has been very fruitful information and all the knowledge that they have been sharing with us throughout these 2 days events for ASA Forum 2021. Yes, the best thing I need you to do now, big smile. Did we got that? Okay, one more picture, everyone. Give a big smile. Yes, I actually have a photographer right here in front, but, everyone can't see this, but, keep on smiling. Yes, that's perfect. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. All of those that are watching, our participants from around the world that are watching, give a big round of applause to all of our distinguished guest speakers, to our moderator, Dr. Montira Unagun as well. Well, ladies and gentlemen, participants from all around the world, this is coming towards the ending for our 2 days of ASA Forum 2021. And I have to say that we are very proud because this is the first time that we have held an online conference like this. Well, we hope that all the information throughout 2 days have brought you all the insight. Very fascinating, all the knowledge here. And also opinions that could really hit you in some of the information that could make a change now, because we have to act fast. So on behalf of the Association of Siamese Architects under royal patronage, we would like to really sincerely thank you to all of our participants from around the world. Thank you to all of our guest speakers. Thank you to our moderator for joining us in these 2 days and for your great support. Just to remind everyone that all the handhelds, all the documents would be available on the website. So if you log on to the website, you can go to worldwideweb.asaexpo.com/forum-2021. And for the videos, we'll be having it uploaded through the website as well. So please look forward for the videos after this. And of course, we hope that everyone would stay safe. Be safe here and be healthy, and we hope to see you for the next online conference as well. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. ขอบคุณค่ะ